So, hey everyone, I'm Conor Svensson. I'm here today to talk about the DevTools Guild. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Ethereum's like the leading platform for dApp development. You know, when people want to build blockchain-based applications, Ethereum is the most popular platform for it. You know, we've seen the various reports that just show how big and strong the ecosystem is. We're obviously all here today and for this week here at Devconnect as well, because we, appreciate, where it's going and that we have this great ecosystem and we really want to see it thrive. A key enabler to be able to develop these apps is to ensure that we have good developer tooling for it as well, because if you're trying to develop an app, you don't really want to get sort of pulled into all of the weeds about having to create the frameworks and everything else that facilitate the app development, because all of a sudden that becomes a big distraction away from what you set out to do in the first place, which is to solve a problem for a person or build a product. And that's different from trying to solve a problem for developers. So we need to have a very solid app platform. The thing is, though, is that these tools are taken for granted by developers. And this is in no way like a sort of slight on developers. It's just more that people have a great idea of this problem they want to solve. And then the first thing they need to do is think, okay, what tools can I use to build this? But then they're not thinking about where those tools come from generally, because they're trying to build a solution to a problem for someone else there. And the reality is that the funding of these sorts of tools is actually very hard to do sustainably. From my own story, I wrote a library called Web3J back in 2016, which is the Java and Android integration library for Ethereum. Stuff like the Ethereum phone uses it. And so, it's a key piece of infrastructure, but it's more of a public good. People, they want to develop on Ethereum on those platforms. They take this library because it enables them to do that. But then we have to find ways to sustain it as well. And Vitalik, before, he's spoken about this whole thing of some of the challenges with these like retroactive public goods programs, in terms of they can be games, but also they can often turn into popularity contests as well. Now, as a rule of thumb, people who write DevTools projects, they're thinking about developers and solving problems for developers. What they're not trying to do is create something that's highly marketable or brandable or anything else. They just want to, solve for that specific demographic there. And that creates some challenges. So as a result of this, we've created something called the DevTools Guild. So are many of you familiar with protocol guilds? Maybe raise a hand if you have. So at least some of you are. Protocol Guild is a similar sort of structure, which is focused on supporting the development of core Ethereum R&D, and also teams building Ethereum clients and other key protocol related projects. We're doing the same, but for dev tooling. So it launched a few months back, and what we have there is 4 broad categories of different projects which are in it. So we have your smart contract languages for developing the actual smart contract. And so that includes Solidity and Viper. We also have these client libraries, which are kind of like your plumbing for talking to Ethereum using different languages. So if you're a JavaScript or TypeScript or Node developer, you'd be using VM or Ethers. If you're on the Java and Android platform, you'd use Web3J. If you're using .NET, you'd use Ethereum. If you're using Python, you'd use Web3Py. And then if you're on Rust, you'd use Alloy there. And then we also have frameworks as well. So the frameworks are where they kind of package up some of these things to make it easier for people to actually develop an app. And so with that, we have like Biddle Guild's Scaffold ETH. We also have 8works as well, which is a Python-based sort of platform, and then 2Foundry, which is used for smart contract development and deployment. And then finally, we have what we call standardization libraries as well. And this is the Sourceify project, which I'm sure for those of you who were here yesterday would be familiar with it for the contract verification service that they provide. So the key thing with the DevTools Guild is ensuring that we have a high bar for quality there. There's a lot of different sort of projects out there, but we want to ensure that it's not, that people have really, put in the effort to really really believe in the importance of their sort of public good there. And so many of our member projects, and this is the kind of the averages, they're over 6 years old. They've had hundreds of releases. They've got thousands of GitHub stars. They have people working on the projects full time or just really dedicated to those projects. But the key thing is that they support the development of apps on Ethereum and a lot of core developer apps and infrastructure. Where's it gone? So yeah, that's kind of some of the eligibility criteria which I just mentioned. But then one of the benefits of us having this sort of guild type structure, so one part of it is it helps reinforce the quality of this tooling. We want to ensure that these tools that people are using to actually develop apps on Ethereum, they work very well, that they're reliable, that they're kept up to date, they're not, they're able to respond to if security vulnerabilities are found and so on. And so being able to sustain this is very important for the entire ecosystem. It also offers the opportunity for increased coordination as well. By having all of these teams kind of in the room, so to speak, it means that there's collaboration that can happen. So if you're thinking in terms of Ethereum upgrades, there's ways for different client library developers to be able to talk to one another and just, whether it's help each other out or just provide feedback or thoughts on how they're going about supporting certain upgrades there. The other side is the transparency that comes with it as well with regards to donations or funds that go through the guild. People can really see the impact of them as well in terms of where those funds go to, which projects they benefit, and what those projects have been doing with the funds as well. This is a big challenge for anyone providing funding for public goods, is that they actually want to know that the money's being put to good use, and it's very hard to track that. So this is another problem that we solve there. So in terms of where we are right now, we launched the guild a few months ago, as I said. We're doing this pilot initially, where the pilot program is really to kind of show the the viability of it, prove our funding model as well. We've got our donation contracts infrastructure live on Ethereum mainnet, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Base, and we use like a vesting type schedule, which I'll talk about in a little bit. In terms of, we all talk about this idea of measuring impact with public goods and open source there. And this is something we're very aware of, the need to do. So there are these sort of traditional metrics around things like, GitHub stars, downloads, and so on. They can be gamed, but at the same time, you do see a sort of consistent narrative emerging for many of these projects that have been around for a long time and are widely used there. We also want to have impact-focused metrics too. So this can be like if a project has got they start learning about, a new big Apple project that's building on top of them. That's something we can surface through the DevTools Guild to make people aware of it. And then the other thing too is that, this helps ensure that Ethereum is more resilient and also it supports the largest possible ecosystem. I think if you look at Ethereum versus any of the other major blockchains out there, you'll see quite a different sort of story in terms of how wide the net is cast with respect to the number of different programming languages that are supported, as well as the different options that exist within those specific programming languages as well there. So these are all things that we strongly believe that the guild helps reinforce, which makes Ethereum more resilient. The other thing now is that, so in terms of the guild, we have a couple of guild coordinators. I'm one of them, but Andrew B. Co-op, who was the editor of Week in Ethereum, he's the other one. And so we're putting out monthly updates for all the different members. If you go to devtoolsguild.xyz, you can see what our member projects are all up to month. So it's a nice way to see what all of these core dev tooling projects are doing and what they're releasing, rather than having to go to different project sites or keep up with lots of different X feeds. You can just see this stuff published each month there. We also have thought leadership pieces that we're publishing as well on funding more generally. In terms of how we approach the actual funding, as I mentioned, we use a model similar to Protocol Guild, which is powered by the Splits project. So what that enables you to do is have any number of donors. They donate into a vesting contract. Funds in that vesting contract vest over a 12-month period, and there's they can be then paid out at points along that vesting period. which are then allocated via the splits contract to each of our member projects. And within those member projects, you have allocated members, as well as like a funding mechanism for specific project-related costs as well. So in terms of where we're planning to go post-pilot, we want to think in terms of, are there other project categories that we could actually support? Formal verification or some of the kind of audit type tools could be a potential angle there. We also want to transition to a longer vesting period time horizon. So we're looking at 4 years, which is in line with what Protocol Guild have done. And then also think in terms of, a pledge or similar to get projects behind the DevTools Guild. So Protocol Guild, they've got the 1% pledge, which is tokens pledging 1% of their allocation to Protocol Guild, trying to think in terms of similar mechanisms for DevTools. So in terms of supporting the DevTools Guild, things you can do, we really want to recognize those organizations that do support the DevTools Guild and, highlight them. One of a recent examples was with the GG24 round by Gitcoin and Giveth. There was a couple of components there that we were beneficiaries of. One of them was their quadratic funding round, which was focused by Giveth. And then the other part is the deep funding round as well, which has been, which all of our different member projects have been pulled into as well. So shout out to them for that. But yeah, we're keen to talk to any organizations who want to take a more active role in supporting the Guild as well and supporting this crucial public good open source for Ethereum. And so that's all I'm going to say on the DevTools Guild. If you want to learn more about it, go to devtoolsguild.xyz, and you can also donate directly to the DevTools Guild via donate.devtoolsguild.eth. Okay, thank you.